So good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome to the Ark. So I'm delighted. I know everybody. So as I said, please feel free to just start talking at any point. I'm delighted that you're joining me today for this book, Naamah by a novel by Sarah Blake, and it is the story of Noah's Ark. Which we are going to stop calling Noah's Ark. We can call it the Ark, or maybe after today we'll call it Naamah's Ark. So it's the perfect day to actually do this. So let me start sharing my piece of this. Okay. This book is called Naamah, and it is about the flood story. And what a perfect day to talk about it. Look outside. It's 99 or 110% humidity. It's cloudy. It rained last night. And also, we're reading Parshat Noach. We're reading the Noah portion this week. So just like we had planned it. And thank you for joining us at me personally and the Jewish Historical Society to explore another view of the Ark. So how do we begin? Well, you know the story. Does anyone want to quickly say what you know about the story of the Ark?
God mad at the people and only chose a small group that he felt should remain alive.
Right. And so there you go. That's the essence of the story. Thank you, Anne. So we all are pretty familiar with this. I think you could probably find a 4-year-old out there on the street somewhere who could tell you the story of the Ark. So it's pretty widespread. And here's how it begins in chapter 6. Over here, Vayar Adonai ki rabah ra'at ha'adam ba'eretz. So, and God's, this part in white is what's in the book. The part in yellow, this is written in the novel, but it's from the Bible. This in yellow is in the book, and it's what Naamah says, our main character. And the pink is what I think she might have been thinking. So, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth. Naamah says, this may have been true. But I think she was thinking, really? Okay, Noach each Sadiq. The Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth. Noah was a just man, Sadiq, and perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with God. Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Naamah says to herself, Naamah married him before God spoke to him. So there, she knew him before he was this special character. Okay, this was a little hidden. This is and promised et briti itach. 2 of everything that is in the earth shall die, but with thee I will establish my covenant, my brit, my bris. And Noah went on, and his sons, his wife, his sons' wives with him into the ark. And Naamah says, how can we do this? Noah asked Naamah again. Do or die, is what she probably was thinking. That's how the story begins. Okay, the flood. V'hamabul haya mayim al haaretz. And this is from Genesis. And the waters prevailed on the earth. And I have to say that this is the perfect day. It looks a little bit like this. And I actually have some elephants out there in the hall. So this book gets tough, and we have it tough. Whether it's a pandemic or a flood, it sucks. So I want you to think as we're talking about this novel and about this biblical story, how it relates to our present situation, because it really does. We're in the middle of a dark time and we don't know when it's going to end. And we're starting to feel pretty trapped, some of us, and some of us are getting out and figuring it out, but it's a real challenge. So, any comments so far? All right. So let's get more into it. What about the flood? Is it a myth or is it a biblical fact? Should believers swallow the Noah story? There was a wonderful article in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz back in 2014 by a man named Arnold Sleip. And he had this really good review of what there is to think about the flood. Did it really happen? So here's a picture of a contest that was on the Sea of Galilee in 2009. And this was, I'm not sure what the theme of the contest was, but this was one of the floats. And so that's a good picture of Noah's Ark. I'm sure there's lots of Noah's Ark artwork all over the land of Israel, and we have it too in our books and homes. So to be or not to be a flood. So there's slight reviews for us that there's no particularly scientific evidence that a flood covered the world's land masses up to Mount Ararat in the mountains of Armenia above Turkey. So we don't really have any scientific evidence of it. And we don't think that 2 of every possible animal on Earth could fit into a boat in the middle of the water. At least it doesn't really make sense to us. But what we do know is that it resembles a lot of ancient flood myths. And we as a Jewish people emerged in the Near Eastern Mesopotamian culture, and we knew these stories. So we incorporated them into our foundational stories. So we have, I think that Sleip tells us that we have some good choices, or we have choices, and see where you are in these choices. We could just say, okay, this is the Bible, this is what it says, I'm going to ignore it, and I'm not going to worry about it, and let's move on. Or we could say, it could possibly have happened. There could have been a flooded area that a lot of people were involved in, and that their known world flooded. And so then this story emerged from that. I have to say, I never believed that until this pandemic hit. And now that I've experienced a planetary event, I'm beginning to wonder if these ancient stories, like where there's smoke, there's fire, that maybe something did happen, but who knows? That's not really all that important anyway. But there is some thought that a catastrophic flood did occur and that created the Black Sea. However, that's not really scientifically proven. So for people of faith, there is usually a middle path, which I know I've sat around the table with the people here today and in other places, and we've had these kinds of discussions. So I know that you know about finding the middle way, that even though we have 2 beliefs in our head, or 2 ideas in our head at the same time. One, the story isn't true, it's a myth. But at the same time, we believe that the Torah is either, I believe in it because it has something meaningful for me, and so we take it as an allegory. So there are 3 records of I'm on last week's Parsha, we're on early flood myths King Ziusudra of Samaria in the 17th century warned that the gods are going to destroy all of humankind in a flood, and you better build a large boat. That's sort of the earliest version we have of this story. And then we have Atrahasis story in that same area of the world, the Near East. He built a boat to escape a flood. But the best version of the story and the most complete before the Bible's version of it was the Epic of Gilgamesh. And you may know that. And Gilgamesh was the son of a god, and he was the ruler of his people. And this is one part of his epic. It's not the main piece of it, but it is there, that the gods are unhappy with people, with humans. But one person and that person's his family is going to get saved on a ship, and he has to bring animals there, and they make it through the flood. And after the flood, the boat lands on top of a mountain. Birds are released to determine if the land has dried, and then the hero Gilgamesh emerges and offers sacrifices. That's pretty similar to what we have written down in the Bible. But the ideas of Gilgamesh on why the gods did it and what the results are going to be and the formation of a people, that story is very different. So think for yourself about how you feel about the flood story, how comfortable you are with it, having it as the second reading in the Bible. And if you're comfortable with it or uncomfortable with it, what are you going to do about it? So, someone wrote a book called Naamah. And who is this author? What do we know about her? She's really a poet. Her name is Sarah Blake, and this is her debut novel. And she's the author of poetry collections, Mr. West and Let's Not Live on Earth. She received a literature fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, and she's featured in important places, the LA Review of Books, American Poetry Review, and Kenyon Review. And currently, she lives outside of London in the UK. That's her, and that's the book. I thought I would read you a small piece of one of her poems. She writes in free verse, and this is a poem called Starship, and it's about people who are out there in the stars. They explain that we can live longer if we want. Their medical advances are significant. They explain that crime is not tolerated, that racism, sexism, and other prejudices are criminal. They will provide the therapy to anyone who recognizes they need help to adjust. And it is hard to believe all of it. So here's a woman in the 21st century who feels like she's living in a complicated world, and maybe out there in the future somewhere things will be better. But all of this, she questions everything. And our main character in the book questions everything. Okay, so how did this book come across to people? Well, the New York Times liked it. I got a lot of great reviews, but I'll be curious. I know I talked to Liz Rubin a while back, and there's Liz, reading it. And Liz asked me if I liked it, and the book, and I said no. And Liz wasn't loving it either. And when I started reading the book, my review would not have been very favorable. But I have to say, after living through the book and swimming through the book, I should say, and thinking about it and learning more about it, I find it to be a remarkable piece of literature, and it has a lot of insight for me personally, and it poses a lot of questions for us to think about it. So I do think it is an interesting and perhaps even important book. So the New York Times said the Old Testament has its own tale of ecological catastrophe in the story of Noah, instructed to save all species from a flood of waters on the earth. And Sarah Blake's debut novel, Naamah, puts Noah's wife at the center of a really very wild and superbly intelligent reimagining. And it is a feminist book. So you know that from the beginning. And Oprah magazine loved it. Dreamy, transgressive, feminist, retelling of the Great Flood. Noah's wife wrestles with the mysterious metaphysics of womanhood at the end of the world. So we'll see how that plays out in ways you may or may not want to know about. And Kirkus Reviews, which is a serious review also, it says that the writing is deeply feminist, whether she's focused on giving birth or having sex. Blake sketches the female body and experiences in all its gore and glory. In the biblical tradition, reality, dreams, visions blur and bleed together. And I have to say, one of the things I would say about the book is that the writing is rather clinical. It's almost like reading a clinical report of whatever the experience is. It's rather clinical and scientific even, and not so emotional. It sounds like the Republican National Committee or the Democratic National Committee is calling us. Sorry about the phone. Okay. So now that we know a little bit about who the author is, Sarah Blake, and how the book was received, let's see who the main character is. Who is Naamah? Give me a little hand raise if you've heard that name before. If you've heard of Naamah, Rhonda has? Right. Okay. If you've never heard of her, that's probably, there's a good reason. And the reason is she's hidden in the text. All right. So Yona Bar Maoz is retired actually from Bar Ilan University, where she was teaching in the Bible department. And she summarizes very nicely how the name Naamah comes to be known to us. So the wife of Noah is mentioned 5 times in the flood story, although she isn't given any personal identity in the beginning. But in that book, Breshit Rabbah, or books of Midrash about Genesis Rabbah, and there it says, and the sister of Tuval Cain was Naamah. Now, who's Tuval Cain? That's Cain, of Cain and Abel. Okay, so she was Cain's sister. All right, we don't know much about Cain's family, but they reappear. There's a lot of Midrash about them. And Cain becomes actually, in Midrash, is a quite important character. But that's for another discussion. Then later, we see that Rabbi Abba Kahana said Naamah was Noah's wife. And why was she given the name of Naamah? It means pleasant. It also means musical. Her deeds were pleasing. And so there was another Naamah. And why did they call her Naamah? She played melodies on the drum. And that was great. The music was beautiful, but it accompanied idolatry, which is not a good thing. The Bible is definitely against idolatry. Okay, so we get the name Naamah from Midrash. Now here we have Rabbi Sylvia Rothschild, and she's in Bromley, Kent, England. She's a Reform rabbi. Yahoo! Okay, and this is a 3D. I mean, this is like a plaster. There's Naamah. And the ark and everything. Okay, in case that you don't know where that picture is. Points out that the later Midrash and mystical literature chose to take her name pleasant, lovely, musical, and transform her into a feared seductress and of men, and the woman who married the fallen angel Shamadan, and who mothered the most fearful demon of all, Asmodeus, the king of the demon world. So, and I don't know how familiar we all are with the whole angel stories and angel literature that accompanies biblical literature and Jewish thought, but we actually have it there. And but Rabbi Sylvia Rothschild says to us, whenever a woman is trashed in rabbinic literature and called a seducer, demon, baby killer, prostitute, witch, we know we can find a woman whose strength of mind, scholarship, sense of self is powerful, and she's outspoken, and she threatens weak men. So she makes a case that even the bad things that are said about her make her even more important and powerful. Okay, we have Rabbi Sandy Eisenberg Sasso, who is the first woman Reconstructionist rabbi. She still lives in Indiana, I think, and I have met her. I think she's still practicing her rabbinic, and she's also teaching, but she's written a lot of children's books too. And this is the cover of the book, Naamah, Noah's Wife. So Gail, this would be a good book for you to find if you don't already have it. And all of people who know little ones, a lot of us have grandchildren. So just one example, it's got a lot of text, but it's got, Sandy Eisenberg Sasso did not do the drawings. It's illustrated by someone else, but it's very pretty. God said to Noah and Naamah, I have seen great wickedness on the earth. There's too much hate in people's hearts, but your hearts are good and you can help me begin again. Okay, this is the biblical story told the way it is, more or less, so that a child can understand it. Instead of saying God was angry with mankind, God was sad for the ruin which people had brought in the garden called earth. So it's transformed so that it's a little bit softer story. You can see that in the illustrations. So Naamah has her own book. You may know some of Sandy Sasso's other books. She wrote God's Paintbrush. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that book, but that's a great, she's written a lot of children's books, as well as giving a lot of intellectual lectures for adults as well. She's somebody worth knowing. Okay. That's who Naamah is. So this brings us to a lot of questions. And by the way, there really aren't any answers in the book. Well, there's sort of answers. And maybe you'll have some questions. And maybe I'll ask you some questions later and see what you think. So I found an interview with the author. And why did Sarah Blake write this story? By the way, she wrote it in 2016, but it was published about a year before we all got locked down in April of 2019. And Sarah Blake says that she felt helpless. She was at a place in her life where she felt helpless and stuck. And for some reason, she thought about what it would have been like to be on the ark. Now, Blake doesn't share what it was that she was stuck about, but I know that I feel pretty stuck in the pandemic right now. And so this book relates to me on that level in a really big way. So Blake said, I am still terrified of the idea of 14 months on the ark, or over a year. Even if it were a luxury cruise, I'm not sure how I'd handle 14 months in the middle of a flood that I couldn't see an end to geographically and temporally. Well, how do you feel 7 months into the pandemic, not knowing when it's going to end? Are you feeling stuck? I know all of you, and I know that you're doing amazing and wonderful things, and that you're not just sitting around twirling your thumbs at home. So yeah, you, but thanks, Judy. That was a good twirl. And now Naamah, this is from the book. Here you go. This is a quote from the book. Naamah sometimes imagined the water was land, that she could stand on it and face the boat, which she refused to call an ark anymore, disenchanted with it. And these weeks with the animals, rowdy and foul. So I'm asking, I did ask you, how do you feel after 7 months? Okay, so Sarah Blake had something personal to her And her way of getting through her issues was to write this book. So you're going to have to struggle through Sarah Blake's issues to get through this book. And she projects them onto Naamah, and it's an interesting fit. Okay. Why does the story start in medias res, in the middle of everything? So we know that we have in the Bible that Noah is a just man in his generation. He walks with God. That means God is talking to him. God tells him God's plan. And then Noah starts building an ark. And then they get on the ark. And then they have the flood. Okay. This book starts, they're already on the ark. And the waters are raging. It has already stopped raining. We've already had the whatever it was. In the Bible, it says 40 days and 40 nights. And they're in this water. And the sky is dark. The water is dark. At night, it's really dark. There's no stars. And there's no moon. There's nothing in the sky but clouds. And in the morning, there's no sun. There's barely any light. And there's a big dark clouds in the sky. Okay, I hope you're feeling gloomy and depressed. All right, from the book. Naamah is watching the horizon, hoping something will interrupt it and distract her. Put her eye to it, a moment of focus. She's humbled by the flood, but how long can someone reasonably be asked to experience humility? She hears Noah's steps behind her and turns to him. You scared me, she says. Sorry, I came to find you. I don't feel well. Sick? He puts his arms around her waist. There are chickens and other animals wandering the deck. She can hear them, but she can't see them. No, she says, tired. I don't know how often you've said that, but when you sort of get to the end of your rope and people ask you how you feel, someone you love puts a hand on your shoulder or arms around you or calls you on the phone and asks if you're okay, and you say, no, I'm just tired. So this brings us to a thought. During Rosh Hashanah, Betsy Stone gave a talk about trauma during the pandemic. And Naamah in this book experiences trauma. I know Betsy said that that at this time during the pandemic, there are more people going to the dentist than ever because we're grinding down our teeth. So I don't know if you wake up in the morning with your jaws clenched or not, but even if you're not thinking about it or subconsciously, we're all experiencing a kind of trauma. So in the book, Naamah experiences a trauma, selective blindness. Naamah is blind. She can't see the animals, but she can see everything else. So our author says, Sarah Blake says, Naamah's mind would try to protect her from the ongoing high level of anxiety she was experiencing, isolated on the ark, having witnessed the drowning of everyone she knew and loved outside her nuclear family, and caring for and living near all sorts of animals, even wildly dangerous ones. Okay, that Sarah Blake said that in an interview about the book. All right. I don't know. I have been to the Skirball Museum in LA, the Jewish Museum, and they have an ark there that you can walk around. It's not true size, but is it in Tennessee that they have that Noah's Ark Park where the ark is full sized and you can wander around in it? But it had compartments. It wasn't just one big empty space. There were lots of compartments. So, and it was more than one floor. Look at this. It was a big thing. And see, all the animals were in their different spaces. In the book, the larger animals are on the bottom of the ship. The medium animals are in the middle of the ship. This is how the author imagines it, and the smaller animals were on the top. And some animals, like the chickens, could wander around from time to time. And they also took animals out of their pens and ran them around sometimes so they wouldn't cry as much. All right, who's on the boat with these people? Well, I found real pictures of Noah's family. There you go. These are from children's books. So who are the survivors that made it onto the book? The book and the boat, I mean. Okay, well, of course, there's Noah and Naamah. And there's Shem, or Ham, and Japheth, or Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham, we could call him. Maybe we shouldn't say that. It's a Jewish thing. Okay, so none of the women are named. So Sarah Blake gives them names. Naamah from the Midrash. Shem is married to Sadie. Why not? Ham is married to Neela. And Japheth is married to Adatta. Now, they explain in the book, Blake explains in the book, and Naamah explains to us, that they decided ahead of time that they would not reproduce. They would not have the next generation while they were on the ark. They would wait until the flood was over. And there's a scene where Naamah is walking by the bedrooms. Everybody's in separate rooms. And she hears Ham and Neela laughing and banging around. And she knows they're having sex. And she's upset about that. And yes, the result of that is baby Danit. They do have a baby on the ark near the end of the time they're there, but they don't know it's near the end of the time. They weren't supposed, they had agreed not to do that, but in this telling, they actually have a baby on the ark. And that's a very hopeful and optimistic piece of the book. And she was adorable. Okay, there were also other survivors on the ark. Animals, lots of animals. And the Naamah and Noah and their family have to keep them all alive, and they feel a big responsibility. Naamah talks about this in the book. They have to continue life on earth after the flood. It's their responsibility that if these animals die, then a whole species will be wiped out, and they don't want that to happen. They feel very responsible in that way, and Naamah talks about that. But they have to live there with the smell and with all the needs of the animals. And there's lots of discussion about feeding them and cleaning them. And Sarah Blake doesn't pull any punches with the words she uses. And for animal waste, she always refers to it as shit. So the book hits you with these punches over and over again. That's just one little way. Okay, there's on the cover of the book is a tiger, because the tiger is an important character in the book. The tiger gets sick, and Naamah works to heal it, and then the tiger passes out, and then Naamah brings it back. It becomes unconscious. Naamah brings it back. It attacks her and almost kills her. So the tiger but she survives. The tiger is an important character. This little yellow ladybug is an important character in the book. Naamah leaves the ark and goes swimming in the water. Gradually the clouds kind of clear. There is sun, but there's like nothing but water. And so Naamah goes swimming, and in one of her trips, she discovers a city of dead children. Great, huh? Very realistic. It's not it. This is a magical, mystical, fantastic telling of the story. And the children want to see something alive. And so she brings this yellow beetle from the ark to the children and leaves it there for a while, and then goes back to retrieve it. The goats are a character. They escape, and that's a small part of the story, and they have to be retrieved. eventually a piece of land appears next to the ark, but nothing is growing on it. And so they take some of the animals out onto that land and run them around. And anyway, the goats were naughty. They were not easy to control. So there is a little piece of the story that way. There's also a story about a sheep who has a baby, has two babies, and one of them dies, and the sheep gets very depressed and wants to die and doesn't want to feed the other lamb. So that's a whole piece of the story, and Naamah, that's a whole storyline. You can see, and these stories are told at odd times and odd places. The story doesn't go in a straight line. You go from the present, you may be talking about a conversation with Noah, you may be talking about the sheep, and then, or reading about the sheep, and then you're reading about something else. So it's like the book is like a puzzle, and you have to put all the different pieces together. I'd like to mention this cockatoo who can speak, but we'll talk more about him. His name is Yael, and Jael, and he's an important part of the story. He's one of the main characters. And of course, there's the raven, that they do send out the raven, and it doesn't bring back anything. And then they send out the dove, who comes back with an olive leaf in this telling, and they don't believe it. And they don't get off the boat even when they see the dove. And then there's a whole discussion about that and how they finally do get off the boat, the ark. So I just think for yourself, have you ever lived on a farm or a ranch? Actually, I know Liz's father was a veterinarian, so you're pretty familiar with animals and what they do and don't do, and how they feel and how you interact with them. But think about your time very close to animals and what that was like, and what that would be like to be locked up with them for over a year. So they're all characters in the book. There are only 8 humans, but they're all and there's more animals. I just picked some of them. Now we
They talk? The animals talk?
Only one of them, the cockatoo. No, they don't. No, they act as animals, but they're up close and personal to the humans. It's not Dr. Dolittle, okay? It's a somewhat realistic telling. All right, Sarah Blake explains that if everything in your world changes and changes suddenly, and everything is upside down, the author in an interview was talking about what would that do to you? How as you as a woman, what kind of games would that play in your mind? So Blake says that Naamah questions her life, her marriage, her selfhood, her gender, her ability to create, her value, her worth, her wickedness, and her goodness. So there's the author has decided to make Naamah queer, lesbian, homosexual, as well as heterosexual. There's a great sex scene near the end of the book with Noah and Naamah, and it's very sweet and loving. You would like it. But there are a lot of other scenes in the book. Noah sleeps in the flashback near the beginning of the book. We find out that as Noah's going around talking to God all the time, and he disappears for hours every day, Naamah wanders around her village and meets this woman named Bethel, and they're great friends, and they take naps together, and those naps lead to having sex, and completely described. On the boat, she sleeps with her daughter-in-law on the deck of the ark. She meets an angel in the water, and the angel has taken the form of a woman, and the angel allows Naamah to breathe underwater. She gives her oxygen tanks, some sort, and it's described as a bubble over her head. And she and the angel talk a lot, and the angel answers some questions for Naamah about the flood and about why God did this and how the angel is connected to God, and the angel is not God, and listens to Naamah complaining about God, and they get to be very intimate. And then at the very end of the book, there's hints all the way through that Naamah is so angry with God, she just wants to talk to him. And she pictures God as him in the book. And she does finally get to God and get to talk to God in a series of plot adventures. And at one point, she says, well, I kissed the angel. And God says to her, well, do you want to kiss me? And she said, yes. And she does. Okay. So in her dreamscape, she befriends a cockatoo. That was that cockatoo, who is endlessly curious about human preconceptions of gender. She questions herself, and she questions the world, and she questions God's intent and his execution of his plans. So I think she may have gone to exploration of sexuality, because in the last decade, we have all gone through that questioning point and the accepting, general accepting of same-sex marriage, same-sex partnerships. There's been a huge and rather long time coming, but seemingly sudden change. And I think our author is part of this wave of thinking. And I wonder if she would write this book in another decade, what issues she would pick to highlight. Now, there's a bunch of divine interactions too. These are 4 characters in the book. So we have humans, we have animals, and we have divine beings. So this is the cockatoo, Yael, who's connected to Naamah and connected to God. And the cockatoo is always trying to protect Naamah. And at some point, and he talks to her. At some points, she can hear him. At some points, she forgets who he is and can't hear him. But he's always trying to protect her from any bad interactions she's going to have with these other 3 divine beings. This is the angel. Naamah describes the angel whom she meets mostly underwater. She meets her initially underwater and eventually sees her a few other places, but mostly in the water. And it's hard to make out any kind of shape of the angel, but she seems mostly feminine. And as I said, the angel protects her, lets her breathe underwater, lets her explore the city with the dead children. She sees mountains and trees, and she meets an adult who died, who's in a cave underwater, and she's painting pictures. So this is imagining what would have happened to the dead people after they were dead. At the very end of the book, they don't. There's no evidence that of all the people who died, there's a lot like bones and pieces of bodies and things around. It's all gone. God made that happen somehow. Okay, this guy is called Metatron, and he's sort of the head angel, and he's always fighting against Naamah and the other angels, and he produces demons. Anyway, he's a bad character, and he shows up from time to time in the book and tries to trick Naamah into doing things or saying things or thinking things. Well, I don't know how many people sitting around this table believe in God. Doesn't matter. How you think you might interact with God. I don't know if you've ever even thought about that, but Naamah thinks about it all the time. And this is a picture of an Egyptian vulture. at least according to Google Images. And I've never seen one. I have seen vultures, but I haven't seen this particular one. And God appears to her as this Egyptian vulture. And so he talks to her, and she says, "Why did you come as a vulture?" And he says, "Well, why not?" But that opens up all kinds of questions for us about the vulture nature of God. Now, God does change into other things and interact with Naamah in another way, but which has no form. But this is a way he thought she could understand God. God thought Naamah could understand God. So this is a yet another group of characters. So for a book that has about 300 pages, yeah, it's got a lot of characters. It has a plot that's arranged like puzzle pieces. And there's a lot, it doesn't use big words, it's easy reading, but because it doesn't move in a linear fashion, sometimes it's kind of hard to follow. And I don't think one would call it a page turner. Although as you get closer to the end, you do want to, your heart starts beating and you really want to find out what's going to happen. So how do we end this? Let's review the elements of a novel. Well, the setting, first of all. So the setting for this book is ancient times. It's in an ark called a teva. And the only other time this word is used in the Bible is when Noah's put in a teva. It doesn't use the Hebrew word salf or basket. It uses the word teva, an ark, a protective space. And I believe that's what Sephardic Jews call their bima, the teva. So, okay. So this setting of this book is ancient times in an ark. It's in the water. You will need a towel after you read this book. You will just feel so wet. And it's during the mother of all storms. Some have called it in some of the reviews. And is as it is reported in the Bible. The sense of the story is a story. Sarah Blake wants us to take the story that we have heard for years, for generations, for all of Jewish history as that story, and then reinterpret it for our generation. Okay. What's the atmosphere of the book? Well, it's pretty tense. It's depressing. It's scary. Naamah talks a lot about how boring life is. And you might be able to relate to that. Although since March, I don't know if I've had too many boring days. Some of it is really funny. Some funny things happen with us, interactions with the animals, with other people, with the baby. Some of it is really kind of funny. It's very sexy. It's gory. There's the scenes with blood and guts and death, and it's all described. But at other times it's cuddly, like Noah putting his arms around Naamah's waist. We've all had a partner or a friend who's really hugged us at some point and made us feel better. Sometimes you feel very warm reading the book, and other times you feel very cold. I will say at the end, the novel is open-ended and future-oriented. And I liked that about it. So the characters, there's three sets. There's people, animals, and divine beings. Naamah and Noah, Japheth and Adatta, Ham and Neela, and Danit, the baby, Shem and Sadie. I love the fact that there's a Sadie in the Bible, and some of the dead children and adults. They're animals. There's 2 of every kind on earth, and many more than I showed you pictures are mentioned in the book and have little stories about them. And divine beings, the cockatoo who can go between the 2 worlds of the divine and the human, the angel, Metatron, the sneaky, wicked, deceiving, powerful angel. And of course, God is a main character in this book as well. So what kind of conflict? The conflict emerges in Naamah's anger with God for destroying everything, while at the same time she feels guilt at surviving. She's caught. We don't hear Noah. In the Bible, we don't hear Noah talking about this, and we do hear Naamah though all through the book saying, how I miss everybody I know is gone. And she and Noah at the beginning, and they tell the children, their children are grown children, their adult children, that they can't tell anybody what's going to happen. They can't warn people. They can't save anybody else. And Naamah talks about this through the entire book, about how guilty she feels. So I think this is something that we can relate to on so many different levels, from Holocaust survival and Holocaust guilt. If you've been in a war, if you've been in a traumatic situation, if you've been in a car accident, God forbid, or just a bad event in your life, you're glad you survived, and yet you don't always feel completely at peace with it. And Naamah is very angry in this book, and she does resolve that with God. It almost kills her, but she gets overwhelmed and goes into a coma at the end of the book, and finally awakes, and then off to the future. So the plot. Well, we know the plot because we know it through our entire Jewish telling of it. Noah walks with God. God tells Noah to build an ark. Noah and his family and animals get on the ark. The flood starts. The waters last over a year. The people and the animals eventually get off the ark. So that is the plot. However, interwoven with that are the stories of all of Naamah's friend back on before the flood. Her name's Bethel. There's about 10 different animal stories. There's the stories of the dead children. They all have stories. So there are lots of little mini plots sprinkled throughout the book. And our lives are like that. If you're writing your autobiography, you can sort of tell the main events, like the 5 most important dates in your life. But when you think about all the little things that happen that are not necessarily connected to each other, this is what our lives are really like. And I think Sarah Blake does a really good does her part as an author at putting that all together. And the theme is, how does it feel to be Naamah? And Sarah Blake felt stuck, and Naamah feels, for 99% of the book, feels stuck. However, Naamah survives to find a purpose, and that's what we all are hoping we do. And so I'll just end with sunrise. And sun is brightening up outside, but it hasn't quite, the sun hasn't quite made it out yet. I think it will today. But I would have to say at the very end of the book, the message is, it's up to us to create a beautiful world. So thank you. So let's go to comments, questions. Do you think you would read the book? Anybody? Just unmute yourself. Yeah, Mark. Yeah.
2 things. I would never read the book. I'm much too much of a linear reader to do that. But I kept thinking, when the animals, remember the song we learned as the kids, the animals, they came in by twosies?
Yeah.
I just looked it up. It was called Rise and Shine, the Aukie Aukie song. I think that's it. But I guess we learned it in camp. But that was one thing. I also looked up, and I sent you a chat, about saying that Noah's wife was a different name. Do you see that?
Yes, yes, that is true, but I don't think that, I saw that too, but I think that Naamah is the name that, oh, I love this. Noah's wife was Joan of Arc. Okay, I love that. Yes, let's change it to Joan. Yes, there is another name. It's the Bible and biblical literature are pretty complicated, but I think we're sort of settling into Naamah. So,
Okay.
as the more well-known. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just I was curious as to why she brought in some kind of a homosexual background to Naamah. Wasn't that one of the reasons that God was destroying the people, because the men were involved in
Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah.
What's
I'm actually
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay, but I'm also then wondering, obviously there was no prohibition against women homosexual activities?
These are really ancient stories. I'm actually siding, I don't believe I'm saying this, siding with Rabbi Marcy on the Sodom and Gomorrah. That was specifically, I think homosexuality was very prevalent in ancient times. And that was one of the things that the Jewish way of life left. We didn't find that that was the path that we wanted to take. I think that Sarah Blake was just trying to rouse us and excite and titillate us in some way, and that maybe it's part of her own personal experience. I wouldn't take it as a theological statement. I think it's just something about everything in the world is turned upside down, including your gender and sexual desires.
Maybe she just wanted to be very 21st century.
Yeah.
I think it's more that than reaching back into biblical, and she's not, I don't think she's making a comment about the biblical times.
Also, there is nothing in the Torah prohibiting women. It specifically says men. So that's also.
So Marcy, Oliver said that yesterday at JCC kindergarten, they sang a song about Noah's Ark, and I started singing The Animals Came by Tuesdays, and he said, "How do you know that song?" And I said that I learned it at camp.
Me too. I learned it at camp.
Right.
It says
so it's still there.
It says the children of the Lord told Noah to build him an arky. The Lord told Noah to build him an arky. It goes on and on.
Rise and
So
shine and give God your
Yeah,
glory.
glory.
Right.
Yeah, it was camp.
Yeah.
It was camp. It was obviously Jewish camp, but camp.
No, I learned it in Girl Scout camp.
Oh,
So,
okay.
it's think about how universal the flood story is. At least in areas that know the biblical tradition,
Right.
more the Western world. I don't know if the Chinese sing it, but the flood story from the Near East is very well known culturally. I'm telling you, could find any 4-year-old in downtown Stamford could probably tell you about the flood. It's just so well known. It's just part of us.
So there's a thing where you ask somebody, how many animals of each kind did Moses bring on the ark? And most people will say 2. And it's a cognitive test that you're not paying attention, that Moses had nothing to do with the ark.
I'm going to say.
Actually, the Noah story and Naamah, the Noah and Naamah story in the Bible is told twice at the same time. It's told the first 10 or I don't know how many verses there are, and it says that Noah brings 2 of every kind of animal on the ark, and then it repeats itself and says that Noah brings 7 of every kind on the ark. So, and that is in the That is in the actual text. So
No,
there's,
it's 7 of the kosher ones. It says 7 of the kosher ones.
well, they had to save, yes, except for the kosher ones.
No, 7 is of the kosher ones.
Oh,
2 of
7
the
is of the,
others
okay.
and 7 of the kosher.
That sounds like a rabbinic reinterpretation of that. Thank you. That's important. And in the book, they talk about, there's one scene with a bunch of moths or some kind of moth that lights up, and they only live for 24 hours, and then they all die, and they're in this room, and then they all start all over again. So some of them, there had to be like 10,000. Yeah, if they had these, yeah.
So in your first slide, or one of your first slides, quoting from the text, I thought that what you put up said that God was going to destroy 2 of every animal, but I thought the story was that God was going to save 2 of every animal.
Well, let's see. No, God was saving. So let's see. Sorry, got a screen. Sorry about this.
It was like the first or second slide. Here,
I will destroy man. I will
wait.
destroy man.
2 of everything that is in the earth shall die.
But with thee I will establish my covenant.
So that says he's going to destroy 2 of everything.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I didn't notice that either. Thank you. I'll check that out.
Because it seems like God was going to destroy
Yeah,
all of everything except for the 2 that
right.
the elephants and kangaroos use.
I know. Wow.
Lisa, I just texted you the words to the songs, and now all things coming back to me. After this, on the chorus, you then clapped your hands when the chorus was over. All those things are coming back to me. It's got to be, we're talking 60 years ago that I remember this happened. But anyway.
Reward you with 8 weeks at camp. Yeah.
Well, and think about, there's some interesting things not mentioned in this book. And one of the things not mentioned is the rainbow. There's nothing about God's promise.
Right.
And
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to look up Genesis.
I just keep thinking of I think it was Charles Adams or Lawson, the cartoon with the 2 unicorns standing on the mountain as the ark takes off.
Right.
They weren't saved.
My favorite cartoon is with Mr. and Mrs. Noah on the bow of the ark saying, "But imagine if it was snow."
I used to have one up in my science lab with the ark with all of the holes in it saying, "I guess we shouldn't have saved the woodpeckers."
There's another song about the unicorns, though, at Missing the Boat. That's a pretty well-known song, but not from camp.
Right, right. So the book also talks about the food they ate and how she stored the food, and she kept it in sand. So Sarah Blake imagines how they would have stored. They had dried food that she also took seeds and planted them, and it grew in the sand, and they were able to eat. I think carrots are mentioned, I think, but Sarah Blake thought a lot about it, did a lot of research. I think she researched the biblical end of things, but she has definite ideas and not necessarily mainstream, right?
Growing up also, you always learned that the ark was in Mount Ararat, and they supposedly found remnants there. But when I Googled this stuff, it says there's nothing anywhere. So I don't know why we were told that or taught that it was Mount Ararat.
I think there was some kind of discovery there, and they thought it was related to that, but it's not scientifically proven.
Okay.
Right. No. So all we have is a very strong story from ancient times that we have hung on to. And so therefore it must be true in some fashion. Like I said, before the pandemic, I would have sworn that, well, it rained hard one day and everybody made this story up. But I'm beginning to think, where there's smoke, there's fire. Something must have happened.
Well, we've had some major floods. I mean, in that cities destroyed. We know that.
Right,
So
and the tsunami recently. So,
Yeah,
so
right.
it depends how you tell the story, which is what the goal of the Jewish Historical Society is, to tell the story. So thank you for coming this morning. Go grab another cup of coffee or whatever. Oh, good. Well, thank you for tuning in this morning.
Thank you.
And look forward to really seeing all of you in person. And best of luck, and stay strong, stay well. Sei gesund. Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Okay.
thanks, Judy, for telling me.